All right, here we are building a name tag. First thing I'm going to do for my dashboard is I'm going to click on Create New Design. Once this opens up, I'm going to start off by grabbing a box, dragging it onto my work plane here. Now, when I hover over these little white squares, and if I click on them, I keep my dimensions open. So the dimension is just sort of how wide, how long, or how high something is. So I want this to be 45 millimeters wide, or long, and I want it to be 15 millimeters wide. And you'll notice, like, when I click there, I can only change two of the dimensions. To change height, it is this line here, this vertical line here. Click on that, and I'm going to manually enter in 2.5 millimeters. So once again, I have my box, click on the corner square there, set my dimensions to 45 by 15. I am using the tab key to jump in between values, and then change my vertical distance to 2.5. Once I got that, I'm just scrolling up on the mouse to zoom in, and now I'm going to drag a cylinder out and get it roughly in the same area. Now here I want this to be 15 by 15, and the height, that's right, 2.5. And just using the arrow keys, I'm going to try and line this up as best I can. And I notice that it's not lining up perfectly, so what I might have to do is come down to the right and change my snap grid to 0.5. Perfect. You can see that's nicely lined up there. Next, what I can do is I'm clicking on this cylinder, and I'm going to hold down the Control key and press D, which duplicates. And it duplicates right on top of itself, so make sure you don't end up just hitting the duplicate button over and over and over again. I'm going to drag it back into the same area on the other side. To move around, I can either come up here to this cube, or I can hold down the right click button and shift it around. Or if you're on the laptops, you can actually just touch the screen and move it. And I'm using the arrow keys just to move it all around. I'm going to try and line it up. If I make a mistake, I can always hit Control Z and undo. Now, if I click off to the side and drag, I can select multiple objects at once. So I'm going to do that. And you can see here in my shape manager that I have 3 shapes selected. Once I have 3 shapes selected, I'm going to go ahead and group them. And now that's going to be made into one shape. Just gonna step back. If I had made a slight mistake here, like maybe it wasn't lined up, something that you can do, let's say get them all offline or out of line, I can select them all, and I can go here to my Align tool. And you'll notice we have these black dots that pop up. Here on the left side, what we can do is we can align them all to be on this right line. We can align them to be in the middle or on the right. I actually need this guy out here. So again, I'm going to select them all, hit L, and if they're gray, that's perfect. That means that they are completely lined up. They are absolutely aligned. If I went here, I would line them all up to the left, to the middle, to the right. I don't want any of that, so I'm just going to hit Control Z until I'm back. So now that they are all aligned, great. I'm going to group them. You'll notice I can also hit Control G. Once this has been created, we have the base. This is the main body of the name tag we are creating. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to duplicate this, either with this button here, or I can hit Control D. And again, it duplicates right on top of itself. I'm going to drag it off to the side, and I'm going to use my shape manager here and turn it into a hole. Now, of course, the way the holes work in Tinkercad is if you group it with a solid object, it's just as if you would dug a hole in a sandbox or something where you then remove that material. What we're going to do now that we've duplicated this is we're going to, again, click on this corner. We're going to change the dimensions from 60 millimeters in length to 58. Essentially what we're doing is we're taking a 60 millimeter shape. We're taking 1 millimeter off this side and 1 millimeter off that side. And then next, again, we have 15, so we're going to take 1 millimeter off here, which would be 14, and a millimeter off here, which brings us to 13. Next, or last for this, I'm going to make this 1 millimeter high. So you see here we've now got the hole, which is going to scoop out from the top of our tag to create a bit of a walled lip around it. But how am I going to get up here? Well, I could use this black cone here, and I can drag things up and down. But if I want it to be absolutely perfectly synced up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the work plane. Now what this work plane tool does is it allows me to put a work plane wherever. Hopefully you've used this in the putting the number 5 on the die. I think that was the 4th or 5th tutorial. And I could put one here, which doesn't help me. I could put one here, which doesn't help me. And I'm going to put one at the very top. So again, we're going to put a work plane on the very top of my solid tag. And you'll notice that now the work plane is on top of both of my objects. I'm going to select the hole, and I'm going to press the letter D, as in delta. And now it's sitting right on top. This will drop or settle your object on top of the work plane. Now I know that when I drag this over, it is perfectly on top of my main object there. Now I've done a fairly good job lining up. I could do better, but to do it quickly, I'm going to select and drag, and I'm going to use my align tool. I can press the letter L, and I'm going to line it up in the middle here. So this middle dot and this middle dot, and you see that now has perfectly arranged it in the exact center of my shape. To get rid of this orange grid, you can just click the work plane and drag it up anywhere off to the side, and it returns us to our normal work plane. Then I'm going to click on the hole, and I'm going to, using this black cone in the middle, I'm going to start just moving it up and down, and it's going to give me a value here. You see it's at 6, 6.5, 7, 8, 8.59. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to type in -1. And this is now dropped from here 1 millimeter down. That's great. You'll see that it has this really strange shimmer to it. That means that the two faces are absolutely, they're flush together. They're perfectly matched. So now what I'm going to do is select both, and I'm going to group them, and that will scoop out the hole's contents from the main object. Essentially, we what's called applied the hole. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to drag some text, but you'll notice whenever I drag an object out, it goes right to the bottom of my work plane, this blue grid. And that doesn't really work for what I want. So what I'll do is click on the work plane tool here in the top right, and I'm going to click on this surface of my tag. Now anything I put down will be absolutely pressed up against that. So I'm going to bring out my text tool. It's very, very large. I'm going to type in something, let's say Asia. And I'm just going to drag it and resize it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change its height to 1 millimeter. And we just sort of bring it sort of where we think it's close to the middle. And again, we have our align tool. So we select everything with align, put it in the middle, and in the middle there. Nice. Now we're basically done. All we have to do now is make a little hole in the center for our key ring. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out a cylindrical hole, and I'm going to resize this to 2.5 by 2.5. Now we have this very long cylindrical hole, and I'm going to try and get it roughly into the middle. Again, I've got my align tool. Now it's in the center there. And you'll notice though, it doesn't go all the way through. It's not cutting anything. So what I can do now is I could have changed the work plane and moved it to there. So now what I've done is I've dropped the work plane to its regular spot, and I can either use this cone and just cut right through. We can see that. Or I could just press D, which settles it onto the work plane. I kind of like knowing it goes all the way through though. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the body of the keychain tag and the cylindrical hole. I'm going to group them with Control G, and I've now removed that hole from there. I like to keep the text separate because then I can always change it to whatever I like. Maybe I want to make something for Mrs. Funk. There we go. Funk. Cool. And I could always change the color if I really wanted to make it look a little different. We are going to be printing in one color, unfortunately, though. Okay, that's it. Awesome. Now it just comes to download for 3D printing, so I'm going to give it a name at the top here. So, Funk Tag. I recommend putting your name, so actually why don't I do this? Mr. Bristow Tag. And then we go here to export, and you can see there it's already asking me to download for 3D printing. And you want everything in the design, and you want the STL. Sometimes, watch out for this, you might have your text selected, and you go to export, and you'll notice it says the selected shape only. It will download just the text, and that's useless. Make sure everything in the design is selected. You're going to choose STL, and there we go. We now have a very nicely done name tag. This is all ready for printing. And you can verify that you've done a good job by just double checking your measurements, making sure that it is 60 by 15 millimeters, 2.5 millimeters high. And that's it.